Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, because we're on a Wednesday. Oh, my goodness me. We've had excitement today. We've had a partial solar eclipse, which was good fun. I'll show you the pictures at halftime once I get the camera sorted out. There we go. Yeah, that was quite eerie. I can't believe it was 27 years ago we had the last one, which I remember them saying at the time, the next solar eclipse won't be until the year 2026. And I thought, goodness me, that's a long time in the future. Anyway, here we are in the library, he said grandly. Derp is outside on the patio. What are we reading tonight? Well, we're going to be... I'm a glutton for punishment. I am going to go back and read the Glenn Miller section from Ghost Stations 5, wherever it's gone. Yeah, Ghost Stations 4. I feel compelled to read it. I do apologise. So there will be me go on tangents and swearing at Bruce's shocking use of the English language. What else? I can't even find the blessed chapter now. Glenn Miller, where is he? Glenn Miller, come on. The Glenn Miller mystery solved. I think he rather modestly puts it. Glenn Miller, page 50. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So, what are we drinking tonight? Well, we are on the subscription beer. So this is Fuzzy Logic from the Wensleydale Brewery. It says, our core session IPA in Pale Ale combine clean citrus flavors of Centennial and the distinct notes of Talus hops to create an unmistakable beer. So go on, fuzzy your logic. Trust me, mine doesn't need fuzzying. Ingredients: water, malted barley, wheat, oats, hops, yeast for allergens, blah, blah, blah. 4.3%, 4.4%. So, well, what do you know? We haven't even started the show yet, and already we have a dead soldier. And Run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
What are we washing it down with? Well, I didn't go out and get any scotch today, so we are dipping into the Bracken. Thank you, viewer Reg, for that. But I will get some. I will get some scotch tomorrow. In fact, I'll tell you about tomorrow because we may do ghost stories tomorrow night. I'll tell you at halftime. Right, brace yourselves, Glenn Miller. And now the concluding part of the Miller mystery, told in Ghost Stations 4 for the first time. The truth. Letters flooded in after the publication of Ghost Stations 3. Glenn Miller mystery solved. The one which confirmed what I have said, that Miller did not die, came from Mrs. Betty Hockey and is produced on the following page, full, signed and dated. An eyewitness. Did I read this? I can't remember. No, I don't think I did read this. Anyway, when Dennis McCarthy of BBC Radio Nottingham invited me along as guest for his programme Afternoon Special, he pressed me for more details about Glenn Miller. But with this book pending, I was unable to give further details at that stage. I set out only to prove that Miller had not died in December 1944. That I proved without a shadow of doubt. Oh, what's that? It's a shadow. One thing that puzzled Dennis was the fact that such a famous figure could just disappear. Surely somebody would recognize him, he said. Not true. Let us remember that at that time there was only radio, no television. So although people recognized the Miller music, they could not recognize Miller without his uniform. It was the uniform that made him stand out. Let me give you an example. Take Monty's Double. Here you had a double confronting people and fooled them. Why? because the public saw that hat and the uniform, and the mind did the rest. Deception was an art during the Second World War, so no problem for Glenn Miller to take off his uniform and melt into the crowd. And people were not looking for Miller, for they thought he was dead. Be a comma there, Bruce, never mind. The following signed statement came from Mrs. Betty Hockey and is proof enough that Glenn Miller never died in September 1944 as the world was led to believe. Betty Hockey will swear an oath that it was Major Glenn Miller which she saw that March night in 1945. Here then, the signed statement. Get to the end of Betty's letter and then I'll have a beer. So, the Non-Stops Forces concert party were giving a show on the evening of March the 4th, 1945 to the soldiers of CA engineers, that is, canvas in the Bewley Road in the New Forest of Hampshire. It was an outdoor show and the army had built a rickety type stage for our use. We had our own generator for lighting, etc., purposely for shows such as this. It was getting dark, and partway through the show there was a red alert. All lights had to be doused, and we were sitting around thinking, etc., waiting for the all clear, when a car drew in, and out stepped Glenn Miller with two other fellows. Surprise, surprise. And of course, we were all curious, but as he made a definite sign of not wishing to make contact, obviously we did not approach him. When the all clear came, we finished the show and then joined some of them in the mess. We were told that he was on his way to Bewley Airfield, but the commanding officer was tight-lipped and we could glean no more information. Now, of course, because of reading these very interesting ghost station stories and events written by Bruce Barrymore Halpenny, as the years have rolled by, did I indeed see the ghost of Glenn Miller? I think not. I am sure it was him. Betty Hockey, July the 16th, 1990, in Bournemouth, 45 years later. Bum, bum, bum. We definitely need the bum, bum, bum sting in the magnificent Rush beer glass. Thank you, viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. It's quite sweet and flowery, that one. Now that we have established that Miller had not died, I think we have, Bruce. What did happen, and what was the reason behind Miller's mysterious disappearance? It had to be something big, for official documents were forged to support that cover-up. Was Major Glenn Miller a spy? Why is he covered in mint? He's a mint spy. The Goon Show. Yes, from the evidence, it shows that Miller was a spy, and the Miller music was, he's done it again, comma, and the Miller music was the means of sending coded messages. Why? It is certain that OSS were using Miller, and by 15th of December 1944, he was getting very snappy. Miller was said to be very restless. It had nothing to do with the flight to Paris, as has always been assumed, for Glenn Miller never took off in the Norseman, Nordøy Norseman. Yes, Miller was at Twinwood Farm Airfield. That was all part of the deception plan. Lieutenant or Lieutenant, American, so it'd be Lieutenant Don Hayes, the administrative manager for Miller's band, was said to have been at Twinwood Farm and seen Miller off. But in the post-war years, doubts began to surface. Just what did happen to Miller? And many people began to doubt Don Haynes' story. I do not believe a word of it, so let me explain. The facts are the C-64 Nordøy Norseman, or the Nordøy C-64 Norseman, came in as planned for the single-engine aircraft, was part of the deception. It was made known that Miller was afraid to fly. The remark that Basel had supposedly said, What's the matter, Miller? Do you want to live forever? That should be forever, Bruce, not forever. Not two words, one word. Come on. The remark that Basil had supposedly said, "What's the matter, Miller? Do you want to live forever?" came from Don Hayes, all part of the elaborate deception. It was very important to establish that Miller was afraid to fly. And, it was he who had pointed out about the parachutes, hence the remark from Haynes, which, was not true. It was very important to establish that Miller was afraid to fly, and it was he who had pointed out about the parachutes, hence the remark from Haynes, which was not true. 2 commas there, Bruce, doesn't need them. Haynes said that after seeing Miller off, he got into the staff car and drove back to Bedford. The Norseman is said to have taken off at 13:55 hours. The key to the Miller mystery lies with Haynes. He was the man to sow the seeds of deception. So let us look closer at Haynes and retrace our steps. The staff car arrived at Twinwood Farm. In the staff car was Don Haynes, who was driving. Why no driver? So the answer simply to keep down those trusted in. Sorry, read that again. The answer simply to keep those down who the answer I can't it doesn't make sense. The answer simply to keep down those trusted in the deception plan. Right, we got there in the end. So no driver. The other 2 in the staff car were Colonel Basil and Major Glenn Miller. They arrived at Twinwood Farm about 40 minutes before the Norseman. During that time, Miller never got out of the staff car, chain smoking all the time. After some 20 minutes, Basil got out of the staff car which was parked near the control tower, and went into the tower, Bruce. He came back some 10 minutes later and reported that he had been in touch with the station, who informed him that Morgan had left there in a C-64 and to expect him any time now. Shortly after that, they heard the C-64 Norseman. The weather was very bad, as previously stated. The Norseman touched down at Twinwood Farm with Flight Officer John Morgan at the controls. Morgan was a very experienced pilot with 32 missions in B-24s, Liberators. He was top of the league, a modern-day minder, or as we say in Italy, the man with the black hat and white band. He was a good pilot. That is why claims that the Norseman crashed were stupid from the outcome. But that I explained later, for the Norseman did not crash, and its fate I reveal, all in good time. Oh, get on with it, Bruce. This has gone on for another 10 pages here. Oh well. It had to be done, folks, so slange me var. According to Haynes, he drove round to meet the Norseman after it had touched down. With the weather so bad, the tower had talked the pilot down. Morgan kept the engine running while the bags were put in. Haynes said he put Miller's B4 bag into the passenger compartment. Basil climbed aboard and went into the co-pilot's seat. Miller sat behind Basil in a fold-down bucket seat. Haynes closed the door after the supposedly remark. Haynes closed the door after the supposedly remark by Basil. What's the matter, Miller? Do you want to live forever? Oh, he's actually correcting himself here, but it's not supposedly, it's supposed. We only have Haynes' word for that. In fact, when you think about it, we only have Haynes' word for all of it, and it does not fit. Too much play made that Miller was afraid to fly. The parachute remark, all too obvious, but not so at the time. Haynes was out to fool all the people all of the time, and he did a good job of doing so. So, time now for the truth. He's written in caps here. And to dispel the rumours, the Norsemen taxied round for takeoff, but before doing so, Colonel Norman Basel and Major Glenn Miller got out of the Norsemen, and they used a secret tunnel that led from Twinwood Farm to Thurley Airfield Station 3, which housed the 306th Bomb Group throughout the Second World War. It was a top secret mission as far as people at Thurley were concerned, and, it was shrouded in secrecy. Doesn't need the comma, Bruce. At Thurley, that should be a comma. At Thurley, Colonel Basel and Major Miller were spirited away according to plan. No one would question in wartime such a secret operation once orders came from the top, which they did in this case. Doesn't need a comma, which they did in this case. Meanwhile, pilot John Morgan took off as planned, but instead of flying south to Paris, he flew northwest to Poddington, Station 109. This was only a few minutes from Twinwood Farm, and it was easy to locate, even in such dreadful flying conditions. So he's done it again. And, Morgan just followed the railway line, very easy to find, and his arrival at Poddington had been arranged. Again, the information was classified top secret. Again, the information was classified top secret mission, thus no one would ask any questions. It was wartime, so very easy to conceal things if one could pull the right strings, and Miller could certainly do that. So, a light aircraft arriving in bad weather would not mean anything to anybody. Why should it? There was a war going on, and this was part of it, as far as anybody was concerned. Miller was not known to be missing at this stage. Now, let us take it a step further. Miller and Basel were now well away. The Norsemen now at Poddington and out of sight. Why Poddington Airfield? That is easy to answer. Poddington was selected for 4 reasons. They were: 1, it was very close to Twinwood Farm, thus only a few minutes flying time, so less time to be spotted in the air. The Norseman had a distinctive loud pitch to its engine and therefore easily identified. It had an unmistakable sound. 2, Poddington was the furthest American airfield west, which meant the Norseman would not have to overfly any American airfield, so no chance of being identified. 3, Poddington housed the 92nd Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force and, was a very large airfield, thus very easy to hide a small aircraft. Poddington housed the 92nd Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force and was a very large airfield, thus very easy to hide a small aircraft. Now, we won't have a beer yet. 4, Poddington was the number 1 choice after the accident that happened on the 20th of May 1944. The bombers at Poddington were getting ready for takeoff when suddenly one ran off the runway into the nearby woods. Another B-17 cut short its takeoff on seeing the accident and was turning round when another B-17 ran into it. There was a terrific explosion as the bomb loads from the 2 bombers exploded. 21 men died and the runway was out of action for 3 days. Such was the vast crater. Such a crater in which a small aircraft could be broken up and dumped. And as luck would have it, those behind the Miller deception made the correct choice, for on the 24th of December 1944, there was another huge disaster at Poddington. A B-17 crashed on takeoff. 3 of the crew managed to escape before the bombs exploded, leaving a crater ready-made for the Norsemen. So, what part of this mission was, we need to hide the Norsemen, and what would be handy is if a bomber crashed and it left a crater so that we could put the Norsemen in there. Slange, everybody. So, before Miller was announced to the world as missing, he was safely in hiding with Basil and John Morgan, and their C-64 Norseman had been destroyed and safely buried with other bits and pieces and was untraceable. Goodness me, I've just suddenly realised Bruce's. We've had two ands there, and Bruce didn't put a comma behind them. Well, he did at the one at the beginning, so never mind. It was Colonel Basil who had suggested Poddington as the airfield where the C-64 Norseman should go to be destroyed. No one would look for it there, he said, and it was not in the supposed flight path, so no reason to think of Poddington. And as it turned out, should be a comma after out, it was an excellent choice. Morgan confided this to Wing Commander Reg Stidoff some years later when they met in Rhodesia. All revealed later. So far, so good. I'm just trying to figure this out here. It was Colonel Basil who had suggested Poddington as the airfield where the C-64 Norseman should go to be destroyed. Where's the evidence for that? It's almost like as if Bruce just makes these things up and I believe them, therefore they're true. The aircraft had now been safely disposed of, and what happened next only came from Don Haynes, who had allegedly kept a war diary. As I've said, the whole Miller deception hinged on Haynes to spread the rumours. Haynes' task was to bury the truth beneath a mound of deception. On the 16th of December 1944, the Miller Band drove by bus to Royal Air Force Bovingdon for their flight to Paris, but the weather was still so bad that they could not go, and they returned to Bedford. They returned to Bovingdon the following day and again had to return. On the third day, the 18th, there was a break in the weather, and to save the bus journey, which was some 50 miles to Bovingdon, the 3 C-47 Dakotas picked up the Miller Band at Twinwood Farm. From there, they flew straight to Orly Field near Paris. At this stage, there was nothing to suggest anything was amiss. The previous evening, there had been a Miller Band broadcast on the BBC, a recording made by Miller. With no Miller to meet them at Paris, the band asked Haynes, "Where was the Major? Where was Major Miller?" At first, he said he did not know. Then, after contacting SHAEF headquarters, SHAEF headquarters, he told the band that Miller was missing and they had to keep it quiet, not to mention it to anyone. The air of mystery had been planted. Rumours started that Miller's plane had crashed, more rumours that he had defected, and still more rumours. None were true, and all were part of the vast deception plan, which was aided by the fact that the day after Miller's aeroplane went missing, the Battle of the Bulge started. This meant the hunt for Miller's aeroplane was less important now that the Germans had broken through. Again, Lady Luck was riding with Miller, Basil, and Morgan. It is very strange that, he's written this in caps, no official search was made for Miller's aeroplane. Why? Because it never took off for Paris, as I have just shown. Because it never took off for Paris, as I've just shown. And how strange, no reports were ever issued to say if the Norseman was ever seen or heard. Why not? Because top people played it down. General Goodrich had to know. Basil called to see him en route to Twinwood Farm. Why? Last-minute orders? And from SHAEF headquarters, Haynes asked General Barker to telephone General Goodrich for any news of Miller, Morgan, and Basil. A very good ploy. Haynes then got the bad news about Miller being missing from General Barker. Perfect for Haynes, who then went on to say that Goodrich was furious when told Morgan had set out to fly the Channel. Not to note the mention of Channel. in a C-64 in such bad weather. Yet Goodrich knew, for Basel had called it, but yet Goodrich knew. Should be, he's written it, yet, comma, Goodrich knew, for Basel had called in to see him just before going to Twinwood Farm. It should be, for Goodrich knew, comma, for Basel had called in to see him just before going to Twinwood Farm. So that just does not add up, like your grammar, Bruce. General Goodrich knew what was going on, for the C-64 Norseman was his utility aeroplane. That is why nothing unusual to see it fly into Poddington. They knew there would be no search for it, so their secret was safe. And as stated, under a top secret military mission in wartime, no one would dare to ask any questions. God, this is hard work. 27 minutes. Yeah, this is going to be the first half of tonight's show. Just this Glenn Miller chapter. Never mind, we've got a Welsh beer for part deux, and we've got a Welsh ghost book. So, goodness me, the fan's going like mad on the MacBook here. How many programs have I got open here? Not that many. Got Chrome open. We've just quit Pages. It is warm tonight. Never mind. I've forgotten where I am now. After Miller was announced as missing on Christmas Eve 1944, Haynes started to water the seeds of deception that he had planted. He had made known that Miller had said to him, "Don, I have a strange... I'll try and do it as Jimmy Stewart. Don, I have a strong feeling I'm not going to see Helen and Stevie again." Helen was Miller's wife and Stevie was their adopted son. Haynes stated many times that Miller was visibly nervous at having to fly to Paris in the Norseman, and the remark allegedly made by Basel. And what about the strange letter that Glenn Miller wrote to his brother Herb in America? In the letter, he said, "By the time you get this, we shall be in Paris, barring a nosedive into the English Channel." The reference to Channel, Miller crashed in Channel, it was now planted in the public's mind. And as we have seen in Ghost Stations 3, stories emerged even years later, one even claiming to have bombed Miller's plane into the Channel, a claim which I proved in my previous book to be far-fetched. Oh, what's that? Pot calling kettle black? I think so. As indeed are all the other stories that came out of the woodwork, including one from an ex-WAF leading aircraft woman, Muriel Dixon, who in 1980 said she was on duty in the control tower at Twinwood Farm on the day that Miller arrived. She claimed that when she was on duty at Twinwood Farm airfield, she saw a staff car arrive with 4 American officers in, and from the control tower balcony, 4 American officers in it, I think is what it means to say. And from the control tower balcony, she claims to have watched an argument between Major Miller and the other officers, a junior rank eavesdropping on other officers, I ask you. And the weather was freezing rain, yet she stood outside on the balcony and watched the argument. Not possible. She claimed that the 4th man was Warrant Officer Paul Dudley. Not true. There were only 3 in the staff car, Haynes, Basel, and Miller. And her other claim is just as far-fetched. Leading aircraftswoman Dixon then said that Miller was saying he wanted to fly in a larger aeroplane. After listening to all the conversation, she went back inside and gave the pilot taxi instructions and takeoff clearance. However, did Morgan manage to land without her help? Dixon then claimed to have monitored the Norseman's flight as it headed south. A nice fairy story, but not true. The Norseman only flew to nearby Poddington, so why make up that lie? That I cannot answer. I'm not going to say it. It's I'm thinking it's cruel. So many have come out with Miller stories these past few years since the Miller film was shown. This was just another one. The Norseman never landed at Bovington as leading aircraftswoman Dixon claimed it did. The Norseman came to rest at Poddington, as I've just stated. That is fact. We're through the half-hour mark. We are through the half-hour mark, but I definitely need some snacks. So what have we got here? Oh, Japanese style rice snack. Let's just get this out. Japanese style rice mix out of my mouth. Right. Another claim to Miller mystery fame was John Edwards, who started his investigations in the Miller mystery in 1959, a year after I had released details that Miller had not died that December night in 1944. Edwards spent £15,000 over 15 years researching into the Glenn Miller mystery, only to come to the conclusion that the aircraft had crashed into the sea. Not true. I could have saved him £15,000 and 15 years' time and trouble. He had followed the red herrings left by Haynes, and he fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Another team investigating Glenn Miller's mysterious disappearance claimed to have interviewed the US military police, who allegedly investigated the murder of Major Miller in Paris after it was widely rumoured that Major Miller had been murdered outside a whorehouse in the Pigalle district of Paris. You can now see just what a fine job of deception Don Haynes carried out. Those seeds of deception have been well and truly watered over the years. Don Haynes died in 1971. Time now to stop the speculation. Major Glenn Miller had to be got rid of to save an international scandal. Blimey, we've jumped a bit there, haven't we? 1 minute he's a spy, now it's a scandal. It's a giggle, isn't it? Major Glenn Miller had to be got rid of to save an international scandal. He had become a world figure. General Jimmy Doolittle, the commander of the 8th Air Force, had told Miller that the Miller Band was the greatest morale builder in the European theatre, so he had to be removed, and to help to do so, Colonel Norman Basel, who was alleged to be involved in the black market, but then most people were, Colonel Basel was executive officer and General Goodrich's personal pilot. The other was Flight Officer John Morgan. He had to be selected to keep the team together, for Miller was depressed and nervous. Basel was a devil-may-care character, so it needed someone like John Morgan. I'm just trying to figure out how we've got to this point in the story, but never mind. The Glenn Miller mystery is indeed very strange. No kidding. In itself gave rise to sinister misdeeds. Why should officials want to keep the crash a secret? The reason there was a cover-up, right. The reason there was a cover-up for there was no crash. That doesn't make grammatical sense. The reason there was a cover-up, it should be was no crash. It doesn't need that for there is no crash. Why did David Niven never mention Glenn Miller? He was his boss, yet no mention in any of his books. So strange. One so famous as Miller, you would have thought he would have been pleased to have given Miller a mention, but not a word. And why were all Miller's documents suppressed? And why was one not able to see the official burial files for Miller, Morgan, and Basel? Why should their place of burial remain a secret? The reason? They had not died when their files were produced. I work on facts. The fact that Miller had not died. The signed letter from Betty Hockey, which I have produced. Miller was seen in March 1945. He left the country for Rhodesia. Ex-Wing Commander Stidoff met Morgan, who told him how they faked Miller's death and what they had done with the Norsemen. Miller did not fly from Beaulieu, which had been selected because of its position. Miller did fly out from Beaulieu, which had been selected because of its position and units. Beaulieu Airfield with the 3 standard. Oh, the beer burps at 36 minutes and 15 seconds. There we go. Beaulieu Wartime Airfield with the standard 3 runways was built on Hatchet Moor. Sorry, Miller did fly out from Beaulieu, which had been selected because of its position and status. Right. Beaulieu Wartime Airfield with the 3 standard runways was built on Hatchet Moor, just a few kilometres northeast of Lymington. It opened in August 1942 and housed many RAF units before being handed over to the Americans in March 1944. The 365th Fighter Group, with its 3 squadrons, 386, 387 and 388, equipped with the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers, took up residence in preparation for D-Day. In June 1944, the 365th Fighter Group moved to the continent to support the invasion of Europe. The following month, the 4 squadrons, numbers 453, 454, 455 and 456, of the 98th Bomb Wing 323rd Bombardment Group arrived with their Martin B-26 Marauder bombers. They moved to France before the end of the year, and Beaulieu became a ghost station. However, there did remain an American medical unit in the New Forest, and it was still there at the time when Miller arrived. Again, an and an errant comma. During the winter months, the Airborne Forces Experimental Establishment began to arrive at Beaulieu with a weird and wonderful collection of aircraft. Avro Lancaster and Handley Page Halifax bombers, Douglas Dakotas, and many types of gliders. As I said in Ghost Stations 3, my information came from an eyewitness, Wing Commander Stidoff. Basel had also gone to Rhodesia, but moved in 1950 to Singapore, where he had befriended a doctor. Miller was in Rhodesia, but he also wanted to move to Singapore. Stidoff was intrigued, and he pressed Morgan for more details and asked to meet Miller. But at that stage, he refused to say any more, and Stidoff did not see him again. And he told me he thought that they had all moved. But that was just to put me off, for I knew that Reg was holding back and was not telling me the complete story. See, I got thrown there by the comma, it should be. But that was just to put me off, for I knew that Reg was holding back and was not telling me the complete story. He then said he did not want to get involved, for John Morgan had told him from the outset that the Hoover boys, as he put it, were in it, and many people had been warned off. I said I had a right to know the full story, and as Provost Special Security, Reg Stidoff agreed with me. Morgan had said that Miller had been ill for some time. At first, they thought it was the trauma of all the deception, but it turned out to be much more than that. For 2 years, Miller had been having treatment but did not get any better. He made the trip to Singapore after being told about a cancer specialist that could be trusted. It now became clear how Basil had got to be friendly with a doctor in Singapore. That came about by taking Miller. Miller stayed in Singapore for quite some time, and Morgan said he was feeling his old self again. Then Miller started to get the notion that someone was following him and that he had been recognized. Doesn't need the comma, Bruce. Morgan brought Miller back to Rhodesia, where he died in 1956. The following year, rumors started to Glenn Miller. Became interested after I saw a classified filler died in December 1944. Why the Miller rumors should surface again was itself a mystery. But became clear when told the full story. Someone in England had been informed that Miller had just died, and a casual remark had once again set the Miller rumors in motion. Errant comma. Now at last the truth about Major Glenn Miller, and yes, I do know where Miller was laid to rest, but I promise not to reveal it. It would not serve any purpose anyway. Today, the tunnels that lead from Twinwood Farm to Thurley have been bricked up, and Thurley, which is known as Bedford, is a Ministry of Defence establishment. Thus, security is very tight, which means no chance to find the tunnel entrance, but it is there. And was Major Glenn Miller a spy? Was that the reason why they faked Miller's death? The Miller music did contain coded messages, just like in the wartime George Formby film, Let George Do It, in which the band is sending out coded messages to a German U-boat. Not as silly as it sounds, and how near the truth they were, for who wrote the film script? Or was it someone who could read music in the know? The George Formby film was made in 1940. Did Major Glenn Miller get the idea from that war propaganda film? It worked. And you may ask, how do I know that to be the case? And what facts do I have to support such a theory? None. That is my proof of what I say. That is my proof of what I say is true about the Miller music sending out coded messages. None. All Miller's wartime recordings have been destroyed. Why? That is my proof. The BBC likes to boast it has all recordings. Yet all Glenn Miller's wartime recordings were destroyed, and that is my proof. No one would destroy such material, unless, of course, it held a sinister secret. What utter nonsense, honestly. Just, I know a secret. What is that not telling you? It's ridiculous. Oh, hang about. My MacBook is about to die on me because I haven't got it plugged in. Silly boy. There we go. It's rubbish, isn't it? Slags me bum. Your good health. Right, part 2 of tonight's beer. It's Thomas Watkin Great Ales of Wales, Dragon's Keep Indian Pale Ale, 5%. Nice little illustration of a dragon on the front there. It says, a bold and spirited beer that embodies the fighting spirit of the Cymry. Unleash the dragon and discover a new Welsh legend. Dragon's Keep is a premium Indian Pale Ale brewed in Wales, with an expertly crafted blend of US hops. Enjoy flavors of tropical fruits with just a bit of bite. Hops, Tent Nang, Echinote, Citra, Eldorado. Ingredients: water, malted barley, wheat, hops, yeast, allergens in bold. Brewed by the Drop Bear Beer Company, Unit 3, Century Park, Swansea, SA6 8RP. 5% volume of alcohol. Please enjoy responsibly. Yeah, well, we will enjoy it. Look, this is good. Look, it's called Dragon's Keep, and what are we opening it with? We're opening it with the Godzilla bottle opener. Awesome sauce. As you may have noticed, my awesome t-shirt tonight. There we go. Right, half time. We are going to have some wasabi snack mix, and it's a little bit twilighty out there at the moment. What are we up to? It's a couple of minutes to 9 now. But we had, to kind of paraphrase the late, great Bonnie Tyler, we had a total eclipse. Well, we didn't have a total eclipse. We had a partial eclipse. A not of the heart. It was a partial solar eclipse today. I'm just waiting for Facebook to play catch up here. There it is, finally. Right, so here we go. So I set the camera up outside on the tripod, and I set the camera up on the tripod and photographed the eclipse using the video monitor, not looking through the eyepiece. I'm not a moron. I know I'm from Dudley, but come on, cut me some slack. So share screen. Oh no, wrong one, wrong button. Oh, the beer burps again. Do apologize. Share screen. Right, here we go. So what I did was I stopped the lens right and put it onto the fastest shutter speed possible. So, and like I said, I was looking at the video monitor, not through the viewfinder. And there it is. Goodness me, look, there is the old moon creeping across the sun. And there we go again. These are all slightly out of sequence, never mind. That's pretty good. Something went a bit cloudy, but never mind. And but I think there's an awesome one coming up in a second. No, that's it. That's the awesome one there. So yeah, very weird. It suddenly went a little bit cooler. It certainly went a lot quieter. It certainly went a little bit darker as well. That was quite eerie. I do remember the total eclipse we had 27 years ago, which was, like I say, people said, and the next eclipse won't be until the year 2026. And I'm thinking, well, that's bloody years in the future, that is. Anyway, so that was good. I enjoyed that. And I've got a record of it. So, and I've also cleared my camera of the gazillion images that were on there, including loads of wildlife ones. So that's it. Right. There may be a ghost stations. There may be a ghost story show tomorrow night for a simple reason. I have to do an event at the weekend. So I am popping down to that there Glastonbury and staying there on Friday night. So I won't be here to do Sunday night Ghost Stories Extra. So we might do a show tomorrow night. So yeah, we might do a show tomorrow night. All depends whether you lot can behave yourselves. So we have a Welsh beer, and we have this book, The Ghost Tour of Great Britain, rather, Wales, So we'll dip into that. What are we up to? 51 minutes. Goodness me, that blessed Glenn Miller story went on way too long. There are also apparently there are 2 more Ghost Stations books. There is Ghost Station 6 and Ghost Station 7. I'm bracing myself that they're going to be an hilarious disappointment. But I have been searching on eBay and other places, and I think, unfortunately, they're not cheap at the moment. I think the cheapest I could find one of them was about 20 quid. I'm sorry, I'm not paying 20 quid for a Bruce Barrymore Halfpenny book. So sorry, Bruce, but So, the Ghost Tour of Great Britain, Wales. One. The Anglesey Arms, Carnarvon. Visiting Carnarvon, where King Edward II was born and invested as the first English Prince of Wales, I met with Steve, the landlord of the Anglesey Arms. This pub was originally a customer's house, and right next door is the original hanging tower where people would be strangled to death. The hanging tower would serve as a court as well as a prison of execution. It is not surprising, therefore, to find that the Anglesey Arms is haunted. Steve described to me how the glasses on the bar shelf often appear to move of their own volition, sometimes seeming to hang in the air for a few seconds before dropping to the floor. However, it is the fact that the glasses never smash that is the most incredible part of this account. The floor itself is very hard, and glasses have been dropped on it before and have, more often than not, shattered. But when the glasses fall by themselves, they never seem to break. Steve also mentioned that darts matches at the pub are rarely without incident. Sometimes the darts have been seen to jump out of the board, landing a good way away from the board, rather than just falling straight to the floor. The Anglesey Arms is haunted upstairs too. I went to room 3, where, after spending the night, one customer complained that she had awoken and sensed something sitting at the end of her bed. Frightened, she had called to her husband, who was asleep in the twin bed next to hers, but by this time, whatever she had felt on the end of her bed had disappeared. I looked out of the window of room 3, and there, right next door, was the hanging tower. I shudder to think how many poor, unfortunate people were strangled to death with a rope out there, taking at least a quarter of an hour to die. In those days, the idea wasn't for the drop to break a condemned prisoner's neck, it was to leave the prisoner fighting for breath. In light of this, is it any wonder that strange things happen in room 3? I also noticed that there was scaffolding outside the window of this bedroom as renovations were being carried out on the Anglesey Arms at the time. This could be another reason why the place is haunted. I believe that when building work is carried out on an old property, it tends to disturb ghosts. It is either a protest or, more likely, walls or brickwork being moved to have activated an old recording of a traumatic event, just in the same way as the play button on a cassette recorder might switch on if it was dropped onto a floor. Maybe the jolt caused by building work has disturbed the ghosts at the Anglesey Arms and the nearby grisly hanging tower. Well, there we go. Talking about recordings, Nigel Neal's stone tape theory. So, the man who created Quatermass came up with the idea of the stone. Well, it was a play back in the early 70s on BBC One called The Stone Tape, and that the idea was that well, literally, stones can record and play back events, which is not beyond the realms of the impossible. Because if you think about it, tapes, videotapes, and cassette tapes are just a collection of ferric oxide particles that have the ability to store sound and images. Perhaps there is a natural phenomena that can do that. I don't know, but it's a fascinating idea. So cheers, Nigel, and thanks for Quatermass, by the way. Oh, that's a nice beer, that. And in the magnificent United Federation of Planet Shot Glass, again courtesy of viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States, slangs me by. The Castle Hotel, Conway. If you have a penchant for staying overnight in haunted hotels, a great way of finding them is to run a search on the internet. If you type in the words Haunted Hotel Wales into your search engine, there's a very good chance the Castle Hotel in Conway will come out top of the list. Right, we're going to put that to the test now. Haunted Hotel Wales. Haunted Hotel Wales. No, it's come up with the Hanbury Arms Haunted Hotel and Museum. No, Conway has not come up at all. So we'll share that. Share screen. To prove I'm telling the truth. Here we go, Haunted Hotels Wales. So as you look, no, Conway is not there at all. I think we'll do a search the page. Oh, it does help if you actually share the blessed image, JM. Right, let's try it again. There we go. Add to stage. There we go. So, just having a look. No, it's not. I've just typed con into the. It's picking up. How is Castle Hotel Conway haunted? Right, there we go. But, well, that's the only mention down there. Is the Castle Hotel Conway haunted? There we go. Good Lord. So, a bit of scientific investigation there for you. There's a very good chance that the Castle Hotel in Conway will come out top of the list. Well, I'm sorry, Richard, it didn't, but there we go. An old coaching inn that stands on the site of a Cistercian abbey. This hotel used to consist of two famous hostelries, the 15th century King's Head and the much larger Castle. Now one of Conway's most photographed buildings, the hotel has a colourful past, having played host to many famous people, including Telford, Stevenson, Wordsworth, and the Queen of Romania, who lunched in the restaurant while visiting Llandudno. In addition to its roots as an abbey, the hotel backs onto St. Mary's Church and churchyard. It therefore has all the right ingredients for hauntings, and this hotel has an abundance of ghost stories. These include the ghost of a little girl, a man, and the ghost of a little girl, a man, and what people believe to be a monk. Is he called Harry? Let's find out. Visitors to the Castle Hotel regularly report having seen ghosts in their bedrooms, and in one of them, room 104, there is even a large four-poster bed with an inscription on it that reads, "O Lord, protect me through the night." In recent times, this wonderful old hotel has reverted to private ownership. The hotel's owners, the Lavin family, along with their friends and business partner Graham Tinsley, take good food and hospitality very seriously. On my visit, Graham, an award-winning chef, was one of the people to whom I was thrilled to be able to speak, and he has actually experienced ghosts. Oh, I'm not forgetting old beer. Slammed. Oh. Uh-oh. What do you know? For the second time tonight, a dead soldier. And Run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Oh, we've gone through the hour mark. Right. The first person I heard from, however, was the housekeeper, who explained to me that when alone in one of the rooms, she often senses that someone else is with her. She has also experienced the phenomenon. She has also experienced the phenomenon of TVs and fans apparently switching themselves on in rooms for no reason. On other occasions, everyday objects have curiously gone missing, only to reappear in a completely different part of the room. What's more, the housekeeper has actually seen a ghost at the Castle Hotel. One day, as she looked through a glass door in one of the rooms, she saw a girl with blonde hair of about 12 years old, smiling back at her. The girl wasn't a resident, and there was no reason for her to be there, but she seemed to acknowledge the housekeeper, who, after briefly looking away, glanced back to find that the child had disappeared. The housekeeper was genuinely shocked when I told her I had done some research and come across a ghost story involving a young girl and the Castle Hotel that dates back to 1927. Apparently, soon after this girl started working at the hotel, she started to complain of feeling unwell and told colleagues she feared she would die. The hotel manageress was told of the matter, but was unsympathetic, instructing the girl to get on with her work. A few weeks later, however, the girl's warning came true, and she did actually die in the hotel and was buried across the road in St. Mary's churchyard. Perhaps it is the blonde-haired ghost of this girl that the housekeeper saw through the glass door. It was soon after the mysterious girl's death in 1927 that these strange happenings started in the hotel. I attribute this to the fact that while she was sick, the girl had asked those around her to ensure that when she died, she would be buried in Anglesey, which is where she came from. But her wishes were ignored. Staff and residents at the hotel became so troubled by the frequent sightings of the ghost girl that eventually a priest was brought in to perform an exorcism. Despite his best efforts, the haunting continued. Hotel management next turned to a medium, because an extra large wasn't available, who had advised that the only way to put the spirit at rest and put a stop to incidents inside the hotel was to dig up the girl's body from St. Mary's churchyard and abide by her last wishes by taking her remains to be reburied in Anglesey. The haunting had become such a big issue at the hotel that the medium's advice was followed, and after, there's proper use of a comma here, the haunting had become such a big issue at the hotel that the medium's advice was followed, and, comma, After the reburial in a graveyard in Anglesey, everything seemed to calm down. So it reads, and yeah, so the haunting had become such a big issue at the hotel that the medium's advice was followed and everything seemed to calm down. That's Bruce. That's why you put a comma after an and. It appeared that the girl was finally at rest. However, after my chat with the housekeeper, it was seen that the blonde-haired hotel ghost might still be in residence. Graham, one of the directors of the Castle Hotel, also told me a ghostly tale connected with the cellars of this haunted place. It happened on a particularly busy night at the hotel when Graham and his colleagues were working frantically in the kitchen and needed to get new supplies from the cellar. To illustrate his account, Graham took me down the same route he had taken that night, a route he had taken hundreds of times previously without incident. Illumination in the cellar itself comes from 6 lights that stretch from one end of the space to the other. Each light has its own individual on-off switch. Halfway through the cellar on this particular night, Graham was about to switch on the 3rd light when, without warning, something pushed him against the wall and walked past him. A split second later, the light flicked on, but there was no one to be seen in the cellar. He noticed that the room had suddenly become very cold and that the hairs on his arms were standing on end. Graham was... Read that again. He noticed that the room had suddenly become very cold and that the hairs on his arms were standing on end. Graham was a non-believer before this inexplicable event, but now admits that he believes in ghosts and that, in his own words, there is something out there. Do you know what? It is absolutely marvellous to read a ghost story book that has been properly written in English. Proper commas in the right places, grammatically correct. Oh, it's a pleasure, folks. It really is. We're going to have some more Japanese style rice mix. So let's move on. I might have a look to see if there's any more of these ghost tour books because these are great fun. Sloan. Oh. Yes, no, speaking of friend Reg, who bought me the Arbrackham, no 2 Reg walk this week because Reg is off in his motor caravan with his lady friend. So, oh, I told you about yesterday's adventure. Oh, we'll do that tomorrow night. Yeah. Right. Oh, these are all beautifully short. Right. Conway Castle. A tragic story of the death of a mother and her young child provides a disturbing backdrop to Conway Castle. One of Robert Wynn's successors at Plasmere had to leave Conway to fight in a distant war. He also left behind his wife and was gone for a long period of time. When news reached Conway that the husband was about to return, his wife and child eagerly climbed the steep steps to the lookout tower. Their sense of anticipation turned to disappointment when, as night fell, he had not returned. They decided there was nothing to be done and made their way back down the steep steps, but on their descent, the woman slipped and, dragging her child with her, clattered all the way to the bottom of the tower. Critically injured, they were both hastily taken to Conway Castle's lantern room to await the arrival of the local doctor known as Dr. Dick. D-I-C, that is. After inspecting the 2 casualties, the doctor proclaimed he could do nothing to save either of them. A strange thing then happened. Fearing that on their Lord's return, they would personally Fearing that on their Lord's return they personally would take the blame for the imminent deaths of his wife and child, the servants locked Dr. Dick in the room, hoping he would be blamed for the accident rather than them. However, when the man eventually did return, he found the door to the lantern room was unlocked. Entering the room, he saw the bodies of his wife and child, but there was no sign of Dr. Dick. What's more, the doctor was never seen again. Legend has it that the bereaved husband slowly went mad with grief and died soon afterwards. His ghost is still seen wandering around the lantern room, searching desperately for the doctor. It is said that he will continue to haunt Conway Castle and will not be at rest until the doctor is found. So I'm just trying to find where I've shut the page and I can't find where we've finished the there we go. That's what we're looking for. Goodness me. Oh, we got some fan mail. Let's just read the fan mail quickly. Right. Japanese style rice snacks, I think. Welsh beer, lovely. So, you know what? We are going to grab. Just seeing if I've got a proper bookmark here. No, I've got proper bookmarks around here somewhere. Abergele, the Phantom Plane. Ooh. Not all ghost stories date back into the mists of time. However, it is extremely unusual to find a tale quite so modern as this one. A phantom plane first spotted as recently as 1987. It was then that several residents of Abergele saw what seemed to be a large World War II type transport plane. Oh, the beer burp, still apologise. Flying very low over the town. It was definitely an old plane and seemed to be black in colour as well as being very rusty. I'm not convinced about that. It came down so low that the people of the town actually thought it was going to crash, but then quite suddenly it completely vanished. Quite a few of the townspeople made inquiries, making phone calls to the RAF base at Anglesey to see if a plane had been lost or had crashed. But each caller received the same response. There were no reports whatsoever of a plane crashing in the area. A few years later in Llangernew, I don't know how you pronounce that, Llangernew, a little village in Denbighshire, some parents were picking up their children from school when all of a sudden, flying very low along the valley, came a plane. Its description matched that of the phantom plane seen by the townspeople of Abergele, black and rusty. In fact, it was coming in so low over Llangerhill that some of the parents and children dived to the ground because they felt sure it was going to crash. To their relief, the old plane just missed the village and continued on, still very low, just clearing the hills. I think I'll have a quick swig of the old beer. Slange. Everyone assumed the plane was going to crash into the hills. but somehow it managed to lift itself and struggle on. As the plane, I wish I wouldn't use the word plane, aeroplane or airplane. English is aeroplane. Anyway, as the plane disappeared from view, the anxious villagers waited for the sound of an explosion and black smoke. A crash seemed inevitable, but nothing happened. Phone calls were made to the local police and fire service, but there was no reports of a plane having come down. Once again, the phantom plane had simply vanished. Many people wonder how it can be possible to see the ghost of an inanimate object, particularly something the size of an aeroplane. Thank you, Richard. I believe the explanation is actually quite simple. The image in this case isn't being generated by the plane, but by the ghosts of a person or people who were inside the plane. I also believe that if this is indeed the image of a plane that crashed, perhaps during service in World War II, it somehow created a recording of this traumatic event, and it is this recording that is seen by certain people on certain days being played over and over again. Right. I also believe that if this is indeed the image of a plane that crashed, perhaps it is somehow created a recording. Richard, I'm sorry. Nigel Neal was ahead of you by about 40 years. Anyway, whether it was the anniversary of the day of this particular plane, whether it was the anniversary of the day this particular plane crashed near the village of Llanganyu, I don't know. It is an issue I would dearly love to research more deeply, hopefully to find an explanation of what really did cause a phantom plane to reappear in the skies above a quiet little Welsh village. Definitely does deserve a So I'm just having a quick look at the next one. I think that's will be it for tonight, folks. What are we up to? Hour and 19 minutes. Goodness me. I've stolen enough of your time tonight. So, and I was also Gert hungry as well. So, slide. The Blue Lion Inn, Quim. I visited a little village in Denbighshire and found myself at the Blue Lion Inn, which regularly wins Best Pub awards. However, not only is the Blue Lion a good pub, it is also very haunted. The building was originally a farmhouse. It has a huge and incredibly striking fireplace, part of which features in the hauntings at this place. According to legend, a farmer once lived here with his two sons. It was well known that the sons argued regularly, and one day the family fighting became so bad that it could be heard all over the village, and the local constable had to be brought in to put a stop to the disturbance. Assuming he had diffused the argument between the petulant brothers, the constable revisited the farmhouse 2 days later to find only one of the sons at home. The father and elder son explained that the other son, John Henry, had gone away to another country and planned never to return. Everyone in the village believed this story. However, sometime later, workmen digging in the churchyard found something that put an entirely different complexion on the tale. The churchyard is not far from the Blue Lion, and while digging out footings for an extension to the church itself, the workmen uncovered a strange grave where a skeleton was lying on top of a coffin. It soon became apparent that the boy, who had, according to his father, suddenly moved abroad, had actually died in the farmhouse that is now the Blue Lion Inn. Nobody knows how John Henry met his death and whether it was at the hands of his own father, his brother, or both. What is now clear, however, is that John Henry was murdered in the farmhouse, and his body was then carried to the nearby churchyard, presumably at night, where a recent grave was dug up and John Henry's body placed on top of a coffin already in the grave. The soil was replaced, and no one in the village guessed the dark secret known only to John Henry's father and brother. Many believe that the reason John Henry still haunts the Blue Lion pub to this day is because he was not buried in his own grave. Locals have on many occasions reported seeing a figure dressed in old-fashioned clothes. This figure appears to be a farmer wearing a waistcoat, trousers apparently tied at the waist with string. The figure appears to be a farmer wearing a waistcoat, trousers apparently tied at the waist with string. The figure carries a sack. Get your teeth in, JM. The figure carries a cloth sack on the shoulder and is said to walk out from the part of the churchyard where the extension to the old church was built and make his way down the path to the pub. I believe the ghost of John Henry is waiting for a decent burial in his own grave. The ghost also appears inside the Blue Lion, and even to this day, regulars say they see and hear unnatural things in the pub, and it's nothing to do with the amount they've had to drink. The landlord, Terry, told me that on many occasions he has heard someone or something call his name, but when he turns to acknowledge the voice, there is no one there. A former member of staff could apparently always sense, day or night, exactly where the ghost of John Henry was in the pub. However, the most frequently recorded happening in the Blue Lion is the sound of footsteps around the area of the fireplace in one of the rooms. The footsteps seem to be walking quite quickly, and then there is a loud rattling thud as though something is falling to the floor. Possibly this is the reenactment of the death of irascible John Henry, murdered by members of his own family. Oh my goodness me, what it is to suddenly start reading a decently written ghost story book. So Slime's we are. Oh, your good health. Oh, lovely. Right, fingers crossed. We may be back tomorrow night with Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Thursday. So, lucky you. I'm gifting you these beautifully curated live shows for free-ish. So, until tomorrow night, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why not? What else are you going to do on a Wednesday in the middle of August than watch a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head, drink ghost stories, and read alcohol? So, until tomorrow night, Thursday, as ever, if you're watching, stay safe, stay out of trouble. Please don't have nightmares. Good night.